Okay, so secondly, I have a couple more emails, and very similar to the one that I read in the last show. And I want to read these because I feel like I want to give, as small as it may be, a platform for these people to be able to say, "Hey, we're here. We're not necessarily queer, though we may also be that, but we like to sleep with multiple people. And although we know you think that's weird, we don't, and feel like we should be treated, as a normal person, regardless of what our preferences are, because you shouldn't really care." Yeah, I mean, I think they need to work on their chant a little bit, but that's a good start. So first of two emails along these lines, a woman says, "I'm a bisexual woman in a committed polyamorous relationship with a straight man. While we haven't yet stumbled upon the woman we might both want to marry, the potential is very real for us. It's also the case that if we did want to do so, we would at this point be prevented from having that commitment legally recognized, bringing up the same problems of hospital visitation, parenting, etc. that gay people are fighting for today. There is always discussion about how poly undermines the stability of relationships. It seems to me to run parallel to the discussion of how gay marriage will undermine the validity of straight marriage. The stability in polyamory comes from removing the inevitable rule that comes with monogamy. Quote, "If you fall for anyone else, we're done," unquote. Poly is built on sharing feelings and being almost absurdly honest within the relationship. The situation I'm in now is far more stable than any monogamous relationship I've ever been in, because I never have to wonder if my partner is crushing on someone else and will therefore leave me. I, in fact, am certain that he is crushing on probably several other people, and am also certain that this will not cause him to want the relationship to end. Ta-da! Stability. Anyway, I appreciate your inclusion of us poly folk in your discussion of marriage. You seem to be pretty clear-headed on the subject. That's a relief when the standard story of polyamory these days revolves around how it's bad for the kids, the women, the dog, and everyone else that a few people have chosen to dispense with jealousy and make ourselves happier in the process. Dan Savage makes the point often that you probably don't know how many happily poly people you know, because we're regular humans and many of us are at least semi-closeted. So yes, when one immediately dismisses polygamy as an absurd logical follow-up to marriage equality for gay people, one does sound a little bigoted, and not just to some traditional Muslims elsewhere in the world. Also, thanks for distinguishing us from the Mormons. So not the same thing. All right, one more. Second email says, "Until recently, I was lesbian identified until I met one of my current boyfriends who opened my eyes up to dating crossdressers. So now, for the first time in my life, I am dating someone who I could marry. I live in Michigan, still a Defense of Marriage Act state. Here's my problem. I now have two boyfriends. I have always leaned towards polyamory, but it was never an issue because being a lesbian and being polyamorous was basically default no marriage. Both my boyfriends have expressed a desire to be my real husband, as if somehow the piece of paper given by the government makes it real. That got me thinking about marriage and all the rights suddenly conferred to married couples. Some are necessary, visitation rights and the right to inherit property, but some are byproducts of the broken system. Why should I be eligible for better healthcare simply because I am married to a certain person? I wonder if marriage itself is used as a shorthand for all these benefits and if it isn't somehow discriminatory. After all, it seeks to put a dynamic culture into a box, an ever-expanding box, but a box nonetheless, that will inevitably become outdated and redefined. And does marriage, with all its tax breaks and financial incentives, discriminate against single people who work just as hard and don't have two incomes to support their household? As for my personal situation, I'm sure we'll figure it out, but I wish I didn't have to choose one of my lovers just to be certain his anti-poly family didn't ban me from his bedside and possibly run that same risk with the other. Sound familiar? It does to me too. So there you go. They're out there. They're listening to this show. 3 of them have written in the course of 3 or 4 days. This is not something that is a silly thing to think about. This is real people with real lives having to make real decisions, and their lives are being affected by the current laws and the current cultural stigmas and so on. And so I think the only way to remain consistent on this is to be sort of an absolutist and just recognize if people consent, they want to enter into contracts with each other, and they're of age, they're able to consent, everyone's aware of what's going on, then it's no one's job to try to legislate their morality on anyone else. That is definitely a progressive talking point against the right. When the right wants to legislate their morality, I don't know why we would ever want to go down that same path ourselves.